Hi, this is Eternal King here bringing you another LOR video today. So you're very fortunate that I'm doing a double up today, so two videos for one. Um, just recently I'm uploading my Burn Aggro deck talk about how a slew of games went yesterday, and how I ran the table against some of the top players in the format, or just in LOR in general, and how I did so easily with an exceptionally high win rate using very particular deck concepts. But I wanted to kind of continue on from that to talk about a previous subject and elaborate on it further. So one of the previous videos that I did was called Why My Meta Hits Differently. And essentially the topic of that video was talking about why my stats and why the stats from the top LOR players in Eternal are exceptionally different. I'll give you an example, right? So if you go to the Eternal meta tracker right now, you would see that Gangplank Sejuani is basically the top deck in the game. So just like Gangplank Sejuani midrange is the top deck in the game. Underneath that, you have a Eddie Freljord, essentially just matron spam. Same thing we've seen a million times. And then you have Seraphine Temple, right? And that's kind of what you're getting right now for the top decks in the format. Out of those three, the only deck that I would consider top tier would be Matron Spam. And we've covered it on the channel before, that Matron Spam is just good. And it can be in a Demacia shell, or it can be in a Freljord shell. And the only thing that matters is which one is best at that very moment. Most of the time it's Demacia, but then sometimes it's Freljord. And it just kind of depends. Whatever version of Matron Spam is superior is the one that you should play. They're the same deck, right? Like, it's literally the same deck. It's just different ways to ramp into playing this card. It is, it's the Spectral Matron Eddie deck, right? So that is top tier. Like again, I've said it countless times. The Cloud Drake should get nerfed. But then of course, if you nerf Cloud Drake, then they just end up running the Freljord ramp win condition, and it wouldn't make as much of an impact. I'm not as hardcore about nerfing Eddie anymore, because I've seen the stats for Eddie go up and down. So like, I think it's kind of healthy for the most part. It's on the top end of toxic. It's very powerful, and it has only very, very specific counters, and it can be frustrating to play against. But it just turns out that if you work hard enough, you can slightly mitigate the effectiveness of the deck, depending on the exact circumstances. It's not easy to do, though, because the deck is so powerful. So, other than, yes, Eddie Spectral Matron Spam is one of the best decks in the game, whether it is the Demacia version or the Freljord version, right, you pull out... I've seen, Spectral Matron Heisho, then Cythria. You can literally or Spectral Matron Heisho, Bird Nice. I've seen the most disgusting one-turn free plays ever, because just based off of one card, and the interaction of that one card. So again, I'm not arguing it's not good. It's just that it is good in a very, very specific key interaction that isn't always represented in terms of the success rate of the deck. It just depends. Certain constructions will boast 70% win rates, and then certain constructions will boast 56% win rates. So it's very polarizing. And the truth is, my decks are the exact same way. My decks are literally 100% win rates, or 80% win rates, or 0% win rates. The Eternal is just a polarizing format in general. So right now, if you look at my profile for Runeterra AR, you'll see that the last 5 games that I played with the Zero Aurelia, of this construction in particular, have won all 5 games. So it's 100% win rate. And then I could play another 5 games and probably win those too. And then it would be 10 games with 100% win rate. It's very polarizing in terms of what you need to do to win in certain situations in Eternal. So right now, this is an excellent call. But then a week from now, I can't guarantee that this exact construction is going to be an excellent call. It just depends on what people are playing. And it's the same thing with Burn Aggro. Is again, I made a video saying that Burn Aggro, elusive spam, but basically any sort of non-creature based strategy that targets the enemy's nexus with as little input from the player as possible is going to be very, very good right now, right? So I think one of the I think the meta version of Eddie is like on like 3 Tavern Keepers, 3 Explore units, because it only cares about stalling till the Matron turn. Like that's the entire deck is all in on just doing the one thing that Eddie Matron does, which is play Matron, and then do, you know, spam a bunch of stuff out. So like he's on like 3 Kindly Tavern Keepers and 3 Explore cards, and that's actually correct, because if you don't do that, you know, you'll run into decks like this that actually do something and you'll just die. And so that's why I was winning like 100% of games with both of my Burn Aggro variants and my Elusive Spam variant. They were basically not losing. And they were not losing because they are good decks into the meta right now. You know, again, I don't want to characterize the Eternal meta by one card interaction, which is Matron, but that's obviously a big thing. And you have to choose very hard. You know, it's not the only deck in the game, right? As strong as it is, it's not the only deck in the game. There are lots of decks in Eternal, and it just turns out that, you know, while I'm not 100% sure how it'll do into that one variant of, you know, Matron spam in particular, where they're running like 6 Tavern Keepers. Beyond that, every other deck, I can guarantee that this is gonna like auto win into. And then the Shadow version is going to auto-win as well, and then the Azir Aurelia is going to auto-win, and then Elusive Spam is probably going to auto-win as well. Those are just all good choices over the Ziggs Poppy, the Annie Jin, and the Draven Jinx. Just much better choices. But, you know, again, you're not going to see that reflected in the stats. Like, my meta is just basically ahead of whatever you will see on the deck on the meta stats. Like my deck tracker is typically up to the day in terms of what I'm currently playing, what I'm currently seeing, and what I'm currently experiencing. And it more or less boils down to what is the deck that I can win 80% of games with right now. That's essentially my meta, which is entirely separate from whatever the meta of the actual format is. So like, for example, I will never play Matron Spam. I have never played, in all my years of playing Eternal, and being one of the top players in the format, I have never, ever piloted Eddie. I know like that might be surprising, but like I'm allergic to what that deck does, because what that deck does is unbalanced currently. Just on the edge of unbalance. Like you can bend over backwards to kind of address it and fix it, and players have done that, and it turns out to be effective. But for the most part, Eddie is just like unbalanced in terms of the Matron Spam interaction. Just that is just dumb. Matron Heisho being able to like Matron Heisho on 7, Matron Heisho on 7 on the same turn, and then Cythria, and like now you have like 40 worth of stats in a single turn for 7 mana. Like it is a lot to deal with. Beyond that, honestly, it just comes down to using your own discretion, right? And I also test decks that I think are bad right now, and that's the other thing, is I will deliberately play test things that I may think that are bad to confirm that. So like I'll play a game with Lurk, and like I haven't won a game with Lurk in quite some time. It's just not landing for me. I played some games with Deep. Deep just isn't landing for me right now. So you know, that's going to be reflected in what I consider to be my meta. Things that are going to be winning 100% of games for me are going to be better than decks that aren't doing anything. And the meta shifts rapidly, right? So like I had built this deck to very specifically counter creature spam decks, right? Creature spam decks were the meta, so like the 3-bird nice call, the 3 mana call, the singular will call, right? The she who wanders to mill out all the small stuff. These were all like very specific meta calls that, when removed from that context, are no longer necessary, right? You just go off that. Like this deck is representing a very specific type of solution to a problem, but as soon as that solution is no longer required, then you just go to something else. But yeah, all my decks are exceptionally polarizing that way. So obviously Rise with the 80% win rate, being 100% spell focused, mashing in as much healing as humanly possible, being the best Rise deck in the game and will be forevermore. That was a very specific solution to a problem, and I build Ramp to be a very specific solution to a problem. And I've got aggro decks that I've been, you know, sleeping on, that are very specific solutions to a problem. In this case, I need your Nexus to go bye-bye, but I don't need my creatures to interact with your Nexus, right? Or I only need like one to connect with like a weapon hilt or a riven, and then if the otherwise I can just do the straight up aggro thing or the burn aggro thing. It basically very much assuming that you're not hard running any healing solutions. But yeah, that feels good. And if you look at something even that I'll bring out every now and then, something like a Undir Victor, right? My Undir Victor is designed to deal with a very specific meta problem, right? Like all of my decks are teched in Eternal to essentially be very, very good into one specific type of thing, and like that's all they are. And going beyond that doesn't make a great deal of sense to me when the deck is already quote-unquote perfect at what it does. And then you just, it doesn't have to win. It's impossible to have one deck essentially win into every single, into every single environment, right? You think about like Renekton was kind of like a rebel deck list that came out, and like it was winning 58%, but now it might be like 56. It might go down to 54. Because right now, creature-based aggro is not the way to go. It's just not a good tech option you call it the current, the micro meta, right? Like what are people playing right now? If you have the meta, which is like these are the top decks forever in the format, and then you also have the micro meta, which is like what's going to work for me right now. And I always try to consider both options. Is I'm going to have decks that are good forever, like my OG Azir Aurelia list, like my my Rise list, different solutions to the ramp equation, and then also, these old burn aggro lists that I can bring out at any time that are also exceptionally good and will probably hold on to forever. Swim Elusives I'll hold on to forever. These are just like some of the best decks in the game, objectively speaking, when there is room for them to be successful. And yeah, you'll see that with my stats that they are exceptionally polarizing. It's either like one game with a deck like that I'm just zeroed out on, so it could be like Deep or Lurk, and then it's like, oh, nothing but wins. Because once I figure out where I need to be pulling from my legacy decks, it's very hard for anyone to succeed. Now, if I was to give a recommendation for like decks that are just good into everything, it is stuff like Swain Nora, right? Like Swain Nora, you can't really go wrong with Swain Nora. You have pings, you have removal, you have chumpers, you have, everything. Everything you could possibly want is in this deck, but nobody will play this because that's not, maybe because they don't have the legacy experience, maybe they're not as familiar with the Eternal meta, but they will actually play decks that are polarizing but also fragile, right? And like that is the really bad call. Is don't do that. You really do need to pick a spot. And, this is your line in the sand, and this is where your deck is landing, and you know exactly what you're doing, and you know what you're facing, and then it's just done, right? When I saw that everybody was running nothing but creature spam, and it didn't matter which version of creature spam they were running. Like sometimes they were running Poro King, sometimes they were running a go wide aggro strategy, sometimes they were running Eddie Matron or this or that. So like everything I built out was just like, I'm just going to put a bunch of anti-creature responses in a deck to deal with you. And then now that people are like, oh crap, well you can do that, then I have to play something else, and then you can catch them again. And that's how you maintain like essentially 80% plus win rates in the Eternal format. It's just that like you have decks prepped and ready that are basically existing on the best versions of every prong of the trident, right? This is the best creature aggro deck. This is the best burn aggro deck. This is the best landmark based combo deck. This is the best rally deck, which is Azir Aurelia, right? And so this is, you just have all these prongs of the trident prepped and ready, and all you have to do, give it into any single play step, micro meta at the time, all you have to do is feel it out. Play 2 games with random stuff, and then you're like, okay, I know exactly what this is, because I have enough experience with this, I know what that meta is, that micro meta, I know this micro meta, I know that micro meta, and then regardless, you're just going to absolutely swamp people. And yeah, so that's why, you know, part two of like why my meta hits differently is essentially that the micro changes in the Eternal meta, depending on the kind of decks that you're running into, is constantly changing and cannot be reflected with accurate stats. Period. Full stop. It just cannot be done. Because again, like Gangplank Sejuani is not one of the best decks in Eternal. Period. Full stop. Like, especially not the list that you'll find right now reflected on stats on Runeterra AR. It's just not. What it was a very specific polarizing response to a very specific problem. And then it's done. The flash in the pan is done. Like now you probably shouldn't be playing that deck. But not kind of the way that I approach things. All of my decks are designed to be the best iteration of what it is they're trying to do and can be played now or 5 years from now. And so it just turns out that that's kind of the thing that makes me the format master, is that, you know, regardless of how much time passes, you won't know if I am on the creature spam side, the burn aggro side, the combo win con side, the mid-range control side, right? Like you won't know. You can't possibly know. And as soon as I figure out where you're leaning, then I've got the perfect solution for that. And that's why my meta is essentially more encompassing, right? And it's more rational. It's not just, hey, isn't Spectral Matron spam a good archetype? This is Eternal King, signing out.